The sun was already high when Elena Mackenzie stepped out of her small wooden house. Dust swirled around her boots as she walked toward the chicken coop. The desert wind carried whispers of another scorching day ahead. 3 years had passed since her father died from fever, leaving her alone with nothing but dry land and stubborn dreams. At 28, Elena knew what people said about her. The women in town clicked their tongues when she rode into the settlement alone. They whispered, behind their hands, about the Mackenzie woman, who refused to remarry after losing her husband to a rattlesnake bite. They said she was too proud, too independent, too set in her ways. A woman her age should have found another husband by now, old Mrs. Patterson would mutter at the general store. It ain't natural living out there all by herself. Elena had heard it all. She pretended their words bounced off her like rain on a tin roof, but deep inside, each comment left a small wound. She threw herself into ranch work, mending fences until her hands bled, hauling water from the distant creek until her back ached. Anything to forget the loneliness that crept in during the quiet evening hours. The ranch her father built was small but had good bones. 24 cattle grazed on the sparse grass. A handful of chickens pecked around the yard. The barn needed repairs and the well was running low, but Elena refused to give up. This land was all she had left of her family. On Tuesday morning, she loaded her wagon with eggs and the last of her preserved meat. The town was 30 miles away, but she needed supplies: coffee, flour, and ammunition for her rifle. The journey would take most of the day, but Elena had made it countless times before. The general store buzzed with activity when she arrived. Ranch hands bought tobacco and whiskey. Families stocked up on necessities. Elena kept her head down, gathering what she needed. She was reaching for a bag of flour when she heard familiar voices behind her. "Poor thing thinks she can run that ranch alone," Mrs. Patterson was saying to her friend. "My husband says the land will be worthless in another year." "Someone should talk sense into her," replied Mrs. Cooper. "No decent man would want damaged goods like that Mackenzie woman. She's got too much pride and not enough sense." Elena's hands trembled as she placed the flour in her basket. Heat rushed to her cheeks. She wanted to turn around and tell them exactly what she thought of their opinions. Instead, she paid for her supplies and walked out with her chin held high. The ride home felt longer than usual. Their words echoed in her mind with every bump in the road. Damaged goods. Too much pride. No decent man would want her. Beer. The time she reached her ranch, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky deep orange and purple. Elena unloaded her wagon in silence. She fed the chickens and checked on the cattle. Everything was as she left it, but somehow the familiar routine felt hollow tonight. She sat on her porch steps, looking out at the endless desert that stretched toward the horizon. The stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. A coyote howled in the distance and another answered from a different direction. Elena had always found comfort in the desert sounds, but tonight they seemed to emphasize her solitude. "Maybe they're right," she whispered to the night air. "Maybe I am just fooling myself." Tears she had been holding back all day finally spilled down her cheeks. She thought about her husband, James, and how he used to sit beside her on these same steps. He had seen something in her that others missed. He laughed at her jokes and encouraged her dreams. But he had been gone for 3 years now, and sometimes it felt like he took all the warmth in the world with him. No man has ever truly claimed. "Me," she cried out to the stars. Her voice cracked with years of suppressed pain. "Not really. Not for who I am inside." James had loved her, yes, but even he had expected her to be softer, quieter, more like the other wives in town. He wanted her to sell the ranch after her father died and move somewhere more civilized. They had argued about it the week before the snakebite took him away. Elena sobbed harder, releasing emotions she had buried deep for too long. The desert absorbed her tears without judgment. Out here, under the vast sky, she could finally admit the truth that scared her most. She was tired of being strong all the time. Tired of fighting for respect that never came. Tired of proving herself to people who had already decided she wasn't worth their time. "I just want to belong somewhere," she whispered. "To someone." The wind picked up, rustling through the sagebrush around her property. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called softly. Elena wiped her eyes with her sleeve and stood up slowly. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new struggles to keep the ranch running. But tonight, she had allowed herself to be vulnerable under the protection of stars that had witnessed countless human sorrows. She didn't know that someone else was watching from the hills above her ranch. Someone who had seen her crying and felt an unexpected stirring in his chest. Someone who understood what it meant to be cast out, to be judged unfairly, to carry the weight of loneliness. Ayana crouched behind a boulder, his dark eyes fixed on the small figure sitting on the porch below. He had been observing this woman for weeks, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. She worked harder than most men he knew. She treated her animals with kindness, and her land with respect. She never took more than she needed from the desert. That sustained her. His own people had cast him out 6 months ago. The war chief called him weak for refusing to raid innocent settlements. Ayana believed there had to be another way, a path that didn't lead to endless bloodshed between his people and the white settlers. That belief had cost him everything he had ever known. Now he drifted between worlds belonging to neither. He understood the pain in the woman's voice because it echoed the emptiness in his own heart. But unlike the townspeople who mocked her, he saw strength where they saw stubbornness. He saw courage where they saw foolishness. Tomorrow, he decided, he would find a way to help her. Not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to deserve better than the cruelty of small minds. The desert had brought them both to this place of exile. Perhaps it had also brought them together for a reason. As Elena finally went inside her house and blew out her lamp, Ayana settled in for another night of watching over someone who didn't even know he existed. But that would change soon. The Yao. Spirits had whispered to him that this woman's story was meant to intertwine with his own. The first part of their journey together was about to begin. 3 days after Elena's breakdown under the stars, trouble arrived at her ranch like a dust devil on a calm morning. She was hanging laundry on the line behind her house when she heard the thunder of hoofbeats approaching fast. Too fast for visitors with good intentions. Elena dropped the wet sheet she was holding and ran toward her house. Her rifle leaned against the porch railing, always within reach these days. She had heard stories about raiders hitting isolated ranches, stealing livestock and whatever else they could carry away. 4 men on horseback swept into her yard, whooping and hollering like wild animals. Their faces were covered with bandanas, and their clothes were dirty from long days on the trail. These weren't local troublemakers. These were the kind of men who lived outside the law, taking what they wanted and leaving destruction behind. Well, what do we have here?" called out the leader, a tall man with cruel eyes visible above his mask. "Looks like we found ourselves. A pretty little ranch with no man around to protect it." Elena raised her rifle, her hands steady despite the fear racing through her veins. "You're not welcome here. Ride on." The men laughed at her defiance. "Listen to her, boys. She thinks that Popgun is going to scare us off." Before Elena could react, 2 of the raiders spurred their horses toward her cattle while the other 2 charged at her. She managed to fire 1 shot, but then rough hands grabbed the rifle from her grasp. The leader knocked her to the ground, with the back of his hand. "Tie her up," he ordered. "We'll deal with her after we load up what we came for." Pain exploded across Elena's cheek, but she refused to cry out. She watched helplessly as the raiders drove her cattle toward the gate. Others set fire to her barn, flames licking hungrily at the dry wood. Everything her father had built, everything she had worked so hard to maintain, was being destroyed before her eyes. That's when the first raider fell from his horse. It happened, so quietly that Elena almost missed it. One moment the man was laughing as he watched the barn burn, and the next he was lying motionless in the dirt. An arrow protruded from between his shoulder blades. The other raiders noticed when their friend's horse came back without its rider. "Where's Tommy?" one of them shouted. Another arrow whistled through the air, striking the second raider in the chest. He toppled backward, his foot caught in the stirrup as his horse bolted. The 2 remaining men spun around wildly, trying to locate their attacker. "Show yourself, you coward," the leader yelled, drawing his pistol. A figure emerged from behind the water trough like a shadow given form. Tall and lean, with long black hair tied back and skin bronzed by the desert sun. He moved with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in his own body. In his hands he held a bow with another arrow already notched. Elena had never seen an Apache warrior up close, but she knew immediately what she was looking at. Stories about them filled the newspapers and the frightened whispers of townspeople. Most of those stories painted them as bloodthirsty savages who killed without mercy. But this man had just saved her life. The leader fired his pistol, but the Apache had already moved. The bullet struck empty air while the warrior's arrow found its mark in the raider's gun arm. The pistol fell from nerveless fingers as the man screamed in pain and rage. "This ain't over, savage," he snarled, clutching his wounded arm. He spurred his horse toward the remaining raider. "We're getting out of here." The two surviving raiders fled into the desert, leaving their dead companions behind. Elena sat in the dust where they had knocked her down, hardly believing what she had just witnessed. The barn continued to burn, sending thick smoke into the clear morning sky. The Apache warrior stood motionless for a long moment, watching to make sure the raiders were truly gone. Then he turned toward Elena, and she got her first clear look at his face. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, and dark eyes that seemed to see everything at once. He was younger than she had expected, probably close to her own age. Elena struggled to her feet, her legs shaky from shock and adrenaline. She should have been terrified. Everything she had ever heard about Apache warriors told her to run, to scream, to do anything except stand there staring at him. Instead, she found herself oddly calm. "Thank you," she said simply. The warrior tilted, his head slightly as if surprised by her response. He said something in his own language, words that flowed like music even though she couldn't understand their meaning. "I don't speak Apache," Elena said, spreading her hands to show she meant no harm. He studied her face for a moment, then spoke in careful English. "You are hurt?" His accent was thick, but his words were clear enough. Elena touched her cheek, where the raider had struck her. It was tender and probably bruising, but nothing serious. "I'll be fine, but my barn..." She turned to look at the flames, tears stinging her eyes. "Everything's burning." Without another word, the warrior strode toward the water trough. He grabbed the bucket Elena used for watering her animals and began throwing water on the flames. Elena quickly joined him, working side by side to save what they could of the structure. They fought the fire in silence, two strangers united by necessity. The warrior moved with efficiency, never wasting motion or water. When Elena stumbled, with exhaustion, he steadied her with a gentle hand on her elbow. When she pointed toward a section of wall that wasn't yet consumed, he understood immediately and focused his efforts there. By noon, they had managed to save about half of the barn. The other half was a blackened skeleton against the blue sky. Elena sat down heavily on an overturned bucket, wiping soot from her face with her sleeve. The warrior approached her cautiously, carrying a leather water bag. He offered it to her without speaking. Elena accepted it gratefully, drinking deeply before handing it back. "I don't even know your name," she said. "Ayana," he replied, tapping his chest with one finger. Then he looked at her expectantly. "Elena," she said, copying his gesture. "Elena," he repeated, pronouncing it carefully. Something about the way he said her name made it sound almost musical. They sat in comfortable silence, looking at the damaged barn and the scattered belongings the raiders had left behind. Elena knew she should probably be afraid. This man was supposedly her enemy, a member of a tribe that the territorial government had declared hostile. But he had risked his own safety to help her. He had fought beside her to save her property. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why did you help me?" Ayana was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his words were slow and thoughtful. "You respect this land. I watch. You take only what you need. You are kind to animals. This is good way." "You've been watching me?" Elena asked, but she wasn't angry. In a strange way, it made her feel less alone. He nodded. "From hills. Many days. You work hard, like Apache woman. Elena couldn't help but smile at that comparison. She had been called many things in her life, but never compared to an Apache woman. In the stories she heard, Apache women were fierce, independent, and perfectly capable of taking care of themselves. Maybe it was meant to be a compliment. "Where do you live?" she asked. Ayana's expression grew shadowed. "Nowhere. My people." He struggled to find the English words. "Cast out, no home." Elena felt a stab of recognition. Here was someone else who didn't belong anywhere. Someone else who had been rejected by their own community. The realization created an unexpected bond between them. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "You also cast out?" he asked, studying her face. Elena nodded slowly. "Not exactly. But the people in town think I'm strange. They say I should remarry, should sell this ranch, should be more like other women. I don't fit in anywhere either." Understanding passed between them like a shared secret. Two outcasts who had found each other in the middle of the desert, connected by circumstances neither had chosen. As the sun began to sink toward the western mountains, Ayana stood up. Elena felt a pang of disappointment, realizing he was about to leave. "Will I see you again?" she asked, then immediately felt foolish for the question. Ayana looked at her damaged barn, then back at her face. "You need help, He paused, searching for words. "I help if you want." Elena's heart jumped with something that felt dangerously close to hope. "I'd like that very much." He nodded once, a quick, decisive movement. Then he walked to where his horse was hidden behind a cluster of rocks. Elena watched him mount the spotted pony with fluid grace. "Tomorrow," he said. "Early morning." "Tomorrow," Elena agreed. She stood in her yard watching until he disappeared into the gathering dusk. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't dreading the sunrise. Someone was coming back. Someone who had chosen to stay when he could have ridden away. Someone who saw her as worth protecting. That night, Elena fell asleep with a small smile on her face, despite the smell of smoke and the destroyed barn outside her window. Change was coming to her lonely ranch, and for once, she wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. True to his word, Ayana appeared at Elena's ranch just as the sun painted the eastern mountains gold. She was already awake, having spent half the night listening for the sound of approaching horses and wondering if she had imagined their entire encounter. But there he was, sitting quietly on his spotted pony at the edge of her property, waiting for her permission to come closer. Elena walked out to meet him, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. She had braided her hair and put on her cleanest work dress, though she couldn't say exactly why it mattered. Ayana studied her face with those dark, thoughtful eyes. "The mark," he said, pointing to her cheek where the raider had struck her. A purple bruise had bloomed there overnight. "It pains you?" "Not much," Elena lied. The bruise was tender to touch, but she had endured worse. Ayana dismounted and approached her carefully, as if she were a wild animal that might bolt at any moment. From a leather pouch at his belt, he withdrew a small clay pot filled with what looked like thick green paste. "Medicine," he explained. "From desert plants. Will heal faster." Elena hesitated. She knew nothing about Apache remedies, but something in his manner convinced her to trust him. She tilted her face up, and he gently applied the cooling paste to her bruised cheek. His touch was surprisingly gentle for hands that could draw a bowstring with deadly accuracy. "Thank you," she whispered, acutely aware of how close he was standing. They spent the morning working on the barn. Ayana proved to be an excellent carpenter, skilled at reading the grain of wood and knowing exactly where to place each nail. He worked with the same quiet efficiency he had shown while fighting the fire, never wasting motion or material. Elena found herself stealing glances at him as they worked. She noticed how he paused occasionally to listen to sounds she couldn't hear, always alert to potential danger. She saw how he handled her tools with respect, cleaning each one before setting it aside. Most of all, she observed how he seemed completely comfortable with silence. never feeling the need to fill every quiet moment with unnecessary words. By midday, they had made remarkable progress. The damaged section of the barn was taking shape, again stronger than before. Elena fetched water and the simple lunch she had prepared, bread, cheese, and dried meat. They sat in the shade of her house, sharing the meal in companionable quiet. "Tell me about your people," Elena said eventually, "if you want to." Ayana was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the desert landscape. When he spoke, his words came slowly, carefully chosen. "My father was war chief, strong leader but angry. He believed only way to survive was to fight all white people. Kill soldiers, kill settlers, kill all who came to our land." Elena felt a chill run down her spine, but she remained still and listened. "I believe different way. Said we must learn to live together or both peoples will die. Said some white people respect the earth like you. Father called me weak. Other warriors called me traitor." "What happened?" Elena asked softly. "War chief planned attack on settlement. Women and children there. I warned them, helped them escape. My people discovered what I did." Ayana's jaw tightened. "They cast me out. Said I was no longer Apache, no longer their son." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm so sorry. That must have been incredibly painful. Apache without tribe is like eagle without sky," Ayana said simply. "But I still believe peace is better than war, even if it costs me everything." They sat in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Elena realized that this man had sacrificed everything he held dear to save innocent lives. The newspapers painted Apache warriors as mindless killers, but here was proof that the truth was far more complicated. "My husband died 3 years ago," Elena found herself saying. "Snake bite. We argued the week before he died about me keeping this ranch. He wanted me to move to town, be more like the other wives. I told him I'd rather live alone than pretend to be someone I'm not." "You spoke truth to him?" "Yes. And now? I wonder if our last real conversation was an argument." Elena's voice grew thick with old guilt. "Maybe if I had been more agreeable, more willing to compromise." "Then you would not be you," Ayana said firmly. "Truth is gift, even when it brings pain. Your husband maybe needed to hear this truth." Elena looked at him with surprise. In 3 simple sentences, he had given her more comfort than years of well-meaning advice from townspeople who told her to move on and let go of the past. Over the following weeks, Ayana came to the ranch every morning. He never asked permission, and Elena never questioned his presence. It became as natural as the sunrise itself. Together, they repaired the barn, mended fences, and worked on a dozen small projects that Elena had been putting off for lack of help. More importantly, they began to really talk. Ayana's English improved rapidly with daily practice, while Elena picked up basic words in his language. He taught her to read the subtle signs that warned of approaching weather. She showed him techniques for preserving meat and vegetables that would last through the winter. "In my tribe, women are strong," Ayana told her one afternoon as they worked together to repair a broken fence post. "They make important decisions about camp, about children, about when to move and when to stay. Men respect their wisdom. Here, women are supposed to be quiet and obedient," Elena replied. "They're supposed to depend on men for everything and never have opinions of their own." "This is foolish," Ayana said, struggling for the right word. "Women carry life. Women heal sick ones. Women keep wisdom of generations. How can men not listen to such power?" Elena felt something warm bloom in her chest. For the first time in her adult life, a man was telling her that her strength was valuable, not threatening, that her independence was a gift, not a character flaw. Their friendship deepened with each passing day, but Elena was acutely aware of the danger they were both courting. If anyone from town saw them together, there would be serious consequences for both of them. Apache and white settlers were supposed to be enemies, not friends working side by side to build something together. The risk became real on a Thursday morning when Elena rode into town for supplies. She had hoped to slip in and out quickly, but Mrs. Patterson cornered her at the general store. Elena Mackenzie, you're looking surprisingly well these days, the older woman said with a calculating look. Word is your barn got rebuilt mighty fast after that fire. Hard work and determination, Elena replied carefully. Funny thing though. My nephew Billy was hunting jackrabbits out your way last week. Said he saw smoke from your chimney every morning, but also saw something else. Looked like two people working together. Elena's blood turned to ice, but she kept her expression neutral. Billy needs to spend more time minding his own business and less time gossiping about his neighbors. Mrs. Patterson leaned closer, her eyes glittering with malicious curiosity. You hiding a man out there, Elena? Because if you are, folks have a right to know who's living so close to decent families. I'm not hiding anything, Elena said firmly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. She completed her shopping as quickly as possible, but she could feel eyes following her around the store. By the time she loaded her wagon and headed home, Elena knew that suspicion had been planted. It was only a matter of time before someone came looking for proof. That evening, she told Ayanna about the encounter. They sat on her porch steps as the sun set, both of them understanding that their peaceful routine was about to be disrupted. Maybe you should stay away for a while, Elena said reluctantly, until people stop being so curious. You want me to go? Ayanna asked quietly. No, Elena said quickly, surprising herself with the intensity of her response. No, I don't want you to go, but I'm afraid for you. If they find you here, they make trouble for you also, Ayanna said. White people, they punish women who help Apache. Elena looked at his profile in the gathering darkness. Over the past few weeks, she had come to depend on their conversations, their shared work, their growing understanding of each other. The thought of returning to her previous loneliness felt unbearable. I don't care what they say about me, she said finally. I've been dealing with their judgment my whole life, but you're in real danger here. Ayanna turned to face her fully. In the dim light, his eyes seemed to hold depths she was just beginning to explore. You are also in danger now, because of me. This is not good trade. You saved my life, Elena reminded him. You've helped me fix everything those raiders broke. You've been kinder to me than any man in this territory. If that puts me in danger, then so be it. They sat in silence for a while, both aware that they were approaching a crossroads that would change everything. Elena had never felt so torn between what was safe and what felt right. In my language, Ayanna said eventually, there is word for a person who sees beyond surface things, who understands true nature of others. You have this gift, Elena. What's the word? She asked. He spoke a phrase in Apache that sounded like music in the desert air. It means one who sees with hard eyes. Elena felt tears threaten at the simple beauty of the concept. That's lovely. You see me this way, not as enemy, not as savage from stories. You see man who wants peace, who respects life. This is rare gift. You see me the same way, Elena replied. Not a stubborn woman who won't conform, but as someone who has reasons for her choices. Yes, Ayanna said softly. I see you. Those 3 words hung in the air between them. The 5 men dismounted. Slowly, their boots hitting the ground with deliberate thuds that echoed like gunshots in the evening quiet. Tom Walsh stepped forward, his hand resting casually on the pistol at his hip. Elena felt Ayanna tense beside her, but he remained still, as a statue. Now, Elena, we all know you're a smart woman, Walsh said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Too smart to lie to neighbors who've come out here to help you. Billy Patterson saw an Indian working on your ranch. We found tracks, 2 sets, of footprints around your barn, so where is he? Elena's mouth felt dry as desert sand, but she lifted her chin defiantly. This is my property, Tom Walsh. You have no right to come here making accusations. We have every right when you're harboring a hostile Apache, snapped another man, a shopkeeper named Davies. Do you have any idea how dangerous this is? What if he's scouting for war parties? What if he's planning to attack our families? That's ridiculous, Elena said, her voice gaining strength. If someone was planning to attack you, why would they waste time helping me rebuild my barn? The men exchanged glances. It was clear they hadn't expected her to admit anything, even indirectly. "So you admit there's been an Indian here?" Walsh pressed. Elena realized her mistake, but it was too late to take back her words. "I admit that someone helped me after raiders burned my barn and stole my cattle. Someone who saved my life when you and your friends were nowhere to be found." "Raiders?" Davies scoffed. "What raiders? Nobody else reported any trouble." "Because nobody else lives 30 miles from town," Elena shot back. "Because nobody else cares what happens to the Mackenzie woman living all alone where decent folks think she doesn't belong." A new voice cut through the tension like a knife. "The lady speaks truth." Every head turned as Ayanna stepped out of the shadows beside Elena's house. He had been there all along, Elena realized with a start. Close enough to help her if needed, but hidden from view until he chose to reveal himself. The men immediately drew their weapons, 5 pistols trained on one unarmed Apache warrior. Ayanna kept his hands visible and empty, but he showed no fear as he faced down the hostile crowd. "Easy now," Walsh said, though his gun never wavered. "Nobody needs to get hurt here." "Then why do you point weapons at man who has done no harm?" Ayanna asked calmly. "No harm?" Davies practically sputtered. "You're Apache. Your people have been raiding settlements, killing innocent folks." "I am not my people," Ayanna replied with quiet dignity. "Just as you are not responsible for every white man who has broken treaties or murdered innocents. I chose different path." Elena stepped forward, placing herself partially between Ayanna and the guns pointed at him. "He's telling the truth. He saved my life, helped repair my ranch, and never asked for anything in return. If that's the behavior of a hostile savage, then maybe you need to reconsider your definitions." "Elena, step away from him," Walsh commanded. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." "I understand perfectly," Elena said, her voice ringing with conviction. "I understand that this man has shown me more respect and kindness in the past month than this entire town has shown me in 3 years. I understand that he could have killed me a dozen times over if that was his intention. But instead, he chose to help someone in need." "He's got you fooled, Elena," another man said. "These Indians, they're clever. They know how to manipulate folks." Elena felt anger burning in her chest like fire. "You think I'm too stupid to judge character for myself? Too weak to know when someone means me harm? I've been taking care of myself just fine without your protection or your opinions." "This is bigger than you now," Walsh said, his patience clearly running thin. "We can't have hostile Indians living among us. It puts everyone at risk." "I put no one at risk," Ayanna said steadily. "I live alone, harm no one, take nothing that does not belong to me. I help woman who was attacked by men you could not catch or stop." The truth in his words hung heavy in the air. These same men who claimed to be protecting the community had done nothing when Elena's ranch was raided. They hadn't even investigated the attack or looked for the criminals responsible. "Doesn't matter what you say," Davies insisted. "Apache is Apache. The territorial government has declared your people hostile. That makes you an enemy, no matter what you claim. The territorial government also says women can't vote, own property in their own right, or make decisions about their own lives," Elena said sharply. "That doesn't make those laws just or right." Walsh holstered his pistol with an exaggerated sigh. "Elena, you're being emotional. You're not thinking clearly about the consequences here. If word gets out that you've been harboring an Apache, no decent person will trade with you. You'll be completely cut off from civilization." "What civilization?" Elena demanded. "The civilization that lets women be attacked and robbed without lifting a finger to help? The civilization that judges people by the color of their skin instead of their actions? If that's civilization, I want no part of it." "You're making a mistake," Walsh warned. "A big one. There are laws about aiding and abetting enemies of the territory." "Then arrest me," Elena said, crossing her arms. "If helping someone who saved my life makes me a criminal, then I'll gladly face whatever consequences you think you can impose." The men looked uncertain now. They had clearly expected Elena to be frightened into compliance. Not to stand her ground so defiantly. Davies whispered something to Walsh, who shook his head grimly. "This doesn't end here," Walsh said finally. "We'll be back with the proper authorities, and next time, you won't have a choice in the matter." "There is always choice," Ayanna said quietly. "Choice to act with honor or with fear. Choice to see person as individual or as enemy. You have made your choice. Now others will make theirs." The men mounted their horses with obvious reluctance. They had come expecting easy intimidation, but instead found a woman and a warrior who refused to be cowed by threats and mob mentality. As they rode away, Elena felt her knees go weak with reaction. The confrontation was over, but she knew it was only the beginning of bigger troubles. "They'll be back," she said, more to herself than to Ayanna. "Yes," he agreed, "with soldiers maybe, or territorial marshals, men who will not listen to words." Elena turned to look at him in the gathering darkness. "I'm not sorry for what I said. I meant every word." "I know. This is why—" Ayanna paused, seeming to struggle with something internal. "This is why I must go." "No," Elena said immediately. "We can figure this out. Maybe if we went to the territorial capital, explained the situation to someone with authority." "Elena." Ayanna stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "You have good life here. Land that feeds you. Work that gives meaning. I will not let my presence destroy what you have built. What I've built doesn't mean anything without—" Elena stopped herself before she could finish the thought. "Without you," she had been about to say. When had that become true? "Without what?" Ayanna asked softly. Elena looked into his eyes and saw understanding there, along with something deeper that made her heart race. "Without someone who sees me for who I really am. Someone who values my strength instead of demanding I hide it." They stood facing each other in the dim light spilling from her house windows. The air between them seemed charged with electricity, heavy with words neither quite dared to speak. "I see you," Ayanna said, echoing his words from the night before. "I see woman of courage, woman of honor, woman who stands for what is right even when it brings danger." "And I see you," Elena whispered. "A man of peace in a world that only understands war. A man who sacrificed everything to save innocent lives. A man who—" She took a deep breath. "A man I've come to care about more than I ever thought possible." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Elena felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and fear. She had just admitted feelings that could get them both killed in this time and place. Ayanna reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't move, he cupped her bruised cheek gently in his calloused palm. The paste he had given her days ago had healed the worst of the damage, but his touch was still tender, careful. "Elena," he said, and her name sounded like music in his accent. "You must understand. If I stay, if we—" He struggled to find words for concepts that transcended the boundaries of language. "If we choose this path, there is no going back. Your people will never accept my people cast me out already. We would be alone against world that wants to keep us apart." "I've been alone against the world my entire life," Elena said, leaning into his touch. "But with you, I don't feel alone anymore." "Nor do I," Ayanna admitted. "With you, I remember what it feels like to belong somewhere, to someone." They stood there in the growing darkness, two outcasts who had found in each other something worth fighting for. But even as Elena felt her heart opening to possibilities she had never dared imagine, she knew that the men who had just left her ranch were already planning their return. The choice they faced wasn't just about following their hearts. It was about whether love could survive in a world determined to destroy it. Whether two people from different might. Elena woke before dawn to the sound of many horses approaching. She had barely slept, lying awake next to Ayanna, as they both listened for the sounds they knew would come. When she had made her choice the night before, when she had stepped fully into his arms and whispered yes to his question about fighting for love, they both understood there would be consequences. Now those consequences were riding hard toward her ranch. How many? She whispered, reaching for the rifle beside her bed. Ayanna was already moving, pulling on his clothes with practiced silence. Many. 20, maybe more. Soldiers. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands remained steady as she dressed. They had talked through this moment during the long night hours, planning what they would do when the inevitable arrived. The territorial marshal will be with them, she said, checking her rifle. Maybe the army captain from Fort Verde. They'll have official papers, legal authority. And you will give me to them, Ayanna said calmly. No. Elena's voice was fierce. We talked about this. I won't let them take you to be hanged or shot like some wild animal. Elena. Ayanna caught her hands, stilling their nervous movement. Listen to me. If we fight, you die also. If I surrender, you have chance to live. I don't want to live without you, she said, the words torn from somewhere deep in her chest. Nor do I want to live without you. But one of us must survive to remember what we found together, to carry this love forward. The horses were close now, close enough that she could hear voices calling orders. Elena felt tears burning her eyes, but she blinked them back. There would be time for grieving later. Right now, she needed to be strong. They walked outside together, hands clasped, to face whatever came next. The sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky pink when the riders surrounded Elena's ranch. Territorial Marshal James Crawford led, the group flanked by a dozen cavalry soldiers and several armed civilians, including Tom Walsh. They had come prepared for a fight. Elena Mackenzie, Marshal Crawford called out, his voice carrying the weight of legal authority. By the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona, I order you to surrender the hostile Apache you've been harboring. Elena stepped forward, still holding Ayanna's hand. Marshal Crawford, this man saved my life. He's done nothing wrong. Ma'am, step away from the prisoner, ordered Captain Mills, the commanding officer from the fort. This is for your own safety. He's not a prisoner, Elena said firmly. He's here by choice, helping me rebuild what raiders destroyed. Raiders that nobody from town bothered to track down or bring to justice. The territorial government has declared all Apache warriors hostile, Crawford replied. That makes this man an enemy combatant regardless of his actions. Now step aside. Elena felt Ayanna squeeze her hand gently, then release it. She watched in anguish as he stepped forward, his hands raised peacefully. I am Ayanna of the Chiricahua, he said, with quiet dignity. I surrender myself to prevent harm to this woman who has shown me only kindness. No! Elena moved to put herself between Ayanna and the soldiers. You can't just take him. He's done nothing but help people. Elena, don't make this harder than it needs to be, Walsh called out. The savage has got to pay for what his people have done. He's not responsible for what other people have done, Elena shouted back. Any more than you're responsible for every crime committed by every white man in the territory. Captain Mills dismounted, his face set in hard lines. Ma'am, I understand. You may have developed feelings for this Indian, but he's a warrior from a hostile tribe. There's a bounty on Apache scalps, and orders to bring them in dead or alive. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. They weren't talking about a trial or even imprisonment. They were talking about execution. Wait, she said, her mind racing. Captain, you mentioned bounty hunters and military orders. But what about territorial law? Don't military personnel have to follow territorial legal procedures? The captain paused, clearly not expecting a legal challenge. What are you getting at? Territorial law requires evidence of criminal activity before arrest, Elena continued, drawing on half-remembered conversations with her father, who had served as a local magistrate. What specific crimes are you charging this man with, Marshal? Crawford shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. He's Apache, that's enough. No, it's not, Elena pressed. Being Apache isn't a crime under territorial law. You need to charge him with a specific criminal act. He's been living on your property without legal documentation, Walsh interjected. That's trespassing. On property where I invited him, Elena shot back. A property owner can invite anyone they choose onto their land. Elena, Ayanna said quietly, this will not work. They have already decided. But Elena could see uncertainty in some of the soldiers' faces. She pressed her advantage. Captain Mills, you took an oath to uphold the law, not just follow orders that contradict legal procedure. Marshal Crawford, you represent territorial justice, not mob vengeance. If you take this man without proper charges and evidence, you're violating the very laws you're sworn to protect. The two men exchanged glances. Elena held her breath, hoping her desperate gambit might work. The lady has a point, said a new voice from the back of the group. Elena turned to see an older man in a dark suit riding forward. Territorial Judge Morrison, he introduced himself with a slight nod. I came along to ensure this matter is handled legally. Elena's heart leaped with hope. A judge meant proper legal proceedings, not a lynch mob. Your Honor, she said quickly, I request a formal hearing before any action is taken against this man. He has the right to face his accusers and present his defense. Judge Morrison studied Ayanna carefully. You speak English, young man? Yes, sir, Ayanna replied respectfully. Good. That will make proceedings easier. The judge turned back to Elena. Miss Mackenzie, I'm willing to hold a hearing, but it will need to be in town where proper records can be kept. This man will need to come with us. No, Elena said immediately. If he goes to town, he'll never make it to a courtroom alive. You know as well as I do what happens to Apache prisoners. Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Elena could practically see him weighing legal procedure against practical reality. I propose a compromise, he said finally. We'll hold the hearing here today in the open air. I'll act as presiding judge. Marshal Crawford can present any charges. And Miss Mackenzie can speak in the defendant's defense. Captain Mills looked skeptical. Sir, this is highly irregular. So is executing a man without trial, the judge replied firmly. We'll do this properly, or not at all. What followed was unlike any legal proceeding Elena had ever witnessed. Judge Morrison used an overturned crate as his bench, while soldiers and civilians formed a rough semicircle around them. The desert itself became a courtroom under the vast Arizona sky. Marshal Crawford presented the territorial government's case. Ayanna was a member of a hostile tribe. His presence posed a danger to local settlers, and Apache warriors had been responsible for numerous raids and murders throughout the territory. When it was Elena's turn to respond, she stood beside Ayanna and spoke from her heart. Your Honor, this man saved my life when raiders attacked my ranch. He helped me rebuild what was destroyed, asking for nothing in return. He's told me about the peaceful path he believes in, how he was cast out by his own people for refusing to participate in violence against innocent settlers. She paused, looking around at the faces surrounding them. Some showed hostility, but others seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. Judge Morrison, you said we need to follow the law properly. Well, the law is supposed to judge individuals by their actions, not by their race or tribal affiliation. This man's actions have been those of a peacemaker and protector. If we condemn him based on what other Apache have done, then we're abandoning the principle of individual justice that our legal system is supposed to represent. The woman speaks truth, Ayanna said, stepping forward. I chose path of peace even when it cost me everything I knew. I cannot answer for crimes I did not commit, but I can answer for choice to help women in need, choice to build instead of destroy. Judge Morrison asked several more questions, inquiring about Ayanna's background, his reasons for helping Elena, and his intentions going forward. Through it all, Ayanna answered with calm honesty, never trying to hide his heritage or his exile from his tribe. Finally, the judge called for a brief recess to consider his decision. Elena and Ayanna stood together, hands clasped, while the officials debated in hushed tones. Elena could hear fragments of heated discussion, arguments about precedent and practicality and political consequences. When Judge Morrison returned to his makeshift bench, his expression was grave. This is one of the most unusual cases I've ever presided over, he began. The territorial government's position is clear. Apache warriors are to be considered hostile until proven otherwise. However, The evidence presented suggests that this particular individual has actively worked against hostility and violence. Elena held her breath. I find insufficient evidence to support charges of criminal activity against the defendant, the judge continued. However, given the current state of territorial policy and the safety concerns of local residents, I cannot